This video features a brief talk on religious and political relations between the Christian Byzantine Empire and the Zoroastrian or Magian Empire of the Persian Sassanids, mainly during the 6th and 7th centuries CE. In the 6th and 7th centuries, no less than before, dealing with religious matters formed an important part of Byzantine-Sasanian relations. Religion could bear an impact on armed conflicts and was the subject of diplomatic agreements and treaties between the powers. The historian Menander Protector, who wrote a detailed account of the specific terms of the peace treaty concluded in 562 between Emperor Justinian and the Sasanian king Khusro I, Anushirvan, finishes his report with agreements that relate to the situation of the Christians in the Persian Empire. Quote, "When these issues had been agreed upon and ratified, further agreements were made, namely regarding the Christians in the Persian Empire. They should be allowed to build churches as well as engage in worship without fear, and to sing their hymns of praise without impediment, as it is customary also among us. For they should neither be forced to convert to the religion of the Magians, nor to praise the traditional Persian gods against their will. The Christians in turn should not attempt in any way to convert the followers of the Magian religion to our faith. The Christians should be allowed to bury their dead in graves, as it is customary among us." Unquote. Apparently this was a separate agreement which was concluded after all other issues had been agreed upon. The wording at the beginning of the passage suggests that there may have been an independent treaty guaranteeing the Christians the full freedom to practice their religion and to build churches. However, any attempts to convert Zoroastrians to the Christian faith were strictly prohibited. Political considerations must have led Khusro I to consent to these Christian rites, which must have been proposed by Justinian. A Christian minority population already existed in Sassanid Persia due to earlier deportations of Christian prisoners to the Sasanian Empire. The fact that Khusro granted these substantial privileges to a religious minority also reflects a tolerant attitude that can be seen elsewhere. As the agreement applied to the situation within the Persian Empire only, it was dealt with separately. However, the number of Christians affected by it must have been considerable. Some scholars posit that the passage represents the first ever international regulation concerning the protection of religious minorities. However, in the peace treaty of 422, the Christians in the Persian Empire had been granted the freedom to practice their religion, and the Zoroastrians in turn were guaranteed the same privileges in the Byzantine Empire. In the year 428, the new patriarch of Constantinople, Nestorius, supposedly pleaded with the emperor Theodosius, "Help me destroy the heretics, and I will help you destroy the Persians." Many Nestorian Christians had been prompted to take refuge in Persia as a consequence of the Christological controversies within the Church in the West, including the councils of Ephesus in 431 and Chalcedon in 451. These Nestorian Christians were certainly no longer seen as enemies of the state and not persecuted in the way other Christians had been in the 4th century during the reign of Shapur II. On the contrary, they were now perceived as opponents of the Byzantine emperor, who in spite of several attempts had failed to restore the unity of the Church in the eastern provinces. The tensions between the Nestorians and the Monophysites, who were seen as non-loyal subjects of the Sasanian king, could be felt also in Persia. The Syrian author and anti-Chalcedonian bishop of Constantinople, John of Ephesus, circa 507 to 86, to whom among other works we owe a collection of 58 biographies of contemporary holy men and women, records the words of a Nestorian bishop held before the Sasanian king Kavad I. In his speech, the bishop accused the Monophysites in the Sasanian Empire being traitors because, as he argued, their faith and rites resembled those of their fellow believers in the Roman Empire. Kavad I reacted by giving instructions to persecute all Orthodox Monophysites in his empire. Moreover, the Nestorian Arabic chronicle of Sayert, in its own characteristic way, reflects the close relationship between the Persian Christians and the Sasanian monarchy. Not least the fact that the Sasanian rulers made use of Christian bishops as advisors and ambassadors illustrates their privileged role at the Persian court. Khusro II, 590 to 628, who owed his throne to the Christian emperor Maurice, once more issued a statement to the Christians in which he allowed them to build churches and permitted anybody with the exception of the Magians to adopt the Christian faith. According to the Iranian historian al-Tabari, he did so by referring to the peace treaty of 562. In this context, the author also points out that in 562, the Byzantine emperor had promised to treat the Sasanians in the Roman Empire well, and to allow them to establish fire sanctuaries there. The pro-Christian attitude of Khusro II is also nicely illustrated through a remarkable episode recorded by the Byzantine historian Theophylact Samokhata regarding Khusro's Christian wife Shirin and Saint Sergius. Quote, "In the 3rd year, however, he even approached Sergius, a man who had been most active in Persia, that a child by Shirin be given to him. When not much later this had indeed happened for him, he once more fairly rewarded his benefactor with gifts. He dispatched a letter written in Greek. Word for word the letter read as follows: To the great martyr Sergius, Khusro, King of Kings. I, Khusro, King of Kings, son of Khusro, have sent the gifts, together with the patent, not for men to see, and not in order that from my words the greatness of your most sacred name shall be known, but because the truth about what has happened has been acknowledged, and the many favors and benefactions that I have received from you. For I am lucky that my name may be displayed on your sacred vessels. During my stay at Bertamais, I asked from you, holy man, to come to my help, and that Shirin conceive a child in her womb. And as Shirin is a Christian and I am pagan, our law does not allow us the freedom to have a Christian wife. I wanted to be considerate to you, and because of this I disregarded that law. I held and hold her among my wives every day in legitimacy, and therefore I resolved now to ask your goodness that she conceive a child in her womb. And I asked you, and at the time gave instruction in order that, if Shirin conceived a child in her womb, I would send the cross that she wears to your most holy house. And in order that I and Shirin have this mark for the remembrance of your name, holy man, we hold on to this cross. We have resolved to send instead of the cross its value, which does not extend 4,300 milliregia staters, 5,000 staters. And from when I held this wish within me, and was considering this, until we got to Rison Khosron, not more than 10 days passed. And you, holy man, not because I was worthy, but because of your goodness, appeared to me in a vision during the night. And 3 times you said to me that Shirin had conceived in her womb. And in the same vision I answered you 3 times, saying, Good, good. And because of your sanctity and mercy, because of your most holy name, and because you grant what you have been asked for, from that day on Shirin did not experience what is customary for women. I, however, was not in doubt with regard to this, but trusted your words because you are holy, and truly grant what you have been asked for. When she did not have to bear womanly matters any more, I learned from this the power of the vision and the truth of what you had said. Immediately I dispatched the same cross and its value to your most holy house, giving orders that from its value our paten, 1 paten and 1 drinking vessel be made for the praise of the divine mysteries, but of course also that a cross which is owed be fixed to the revered table, and an incense burner, solid gold, and a hunnic curtain decorated with gold." Unquote. The fact that Khusro II married a Christian woman is certainly remarkable. In the later Persian literature, this wedding received much attention and became the subject of many later Persian romances. Many sources call Shirin Greek, but she was actually from Khuzestan in Persia. Syrian sources even give a detailed description of the wedding ceremony and reveal, for example, that bishops and clergy formed part of her train. Moreover, Khusro built for her places of worship dedicated to Saint Sergius and Mary, the mother of Jesus. We find the most elaborate account regarding Shirin in the so-called Chronicle of Guidi, which was composed in Syriac in the 660s. This is the anonymous work of a Nestorian author who probably wrote in Khuzestan, hence it is also called the Khuzestan Chronicle. After the historiography of Theophylact Samokhata, there are few reliable sources that describe the events along the eastern frontier of the Byzantine Empire. A source such as the Chronicle of Guidi, which dates from a period very close to the end of the Sasanian Empire, is therefore extremely valuable. The text shows that Shirin was also a political factor and personally exerted influence on the appointment of the Catholicos Gregorius 605 to 609. Most likely the marriage between Khusro and Shirin did not meet with approval by the Zoroastrian nobility. Theophylact Samokhata seems to allude to this when, in an earlier passage, he mentions that the king debased the customs of the Babylonians when he slept with the Christian Shirin. In one passage, the author explicitly states that such a marriage was against the Sasanian laws. Nevertheless, Khusro II chose Saint Sergius to sanction his plans and rewarded him generously. Just as Theophylact Samokhata does, many other sources attest to the king's benefactions to the shrine of Saint Sergius. Aside from the Shirin episode, the Persian king's affinity to Christianity surfaces in further Western as well as Eastern sources. According to these, the Patriarch of Antioch, Anastasius, consecrated 3 churches that had been built upon the Sasanian ruler's initiative. Khusro is said even to have worshipped Christian relics. According to Theophylact Samosata, when the Roman ambassador Probus, bishop of Chalcedon, was dispatched to Ctesiphon, the king summoned him to the palace and asked to see the image of the Mother of God. As the bishop carried a representation with him, he allowed the king to take a look at it. Khusro knelt in front of the panel and claimed that the figure represented on it had appeared to him and told him that she was granting him the victories of Alexander of Macedon. However, the claim that Khusro II himself converted to Christianity is not supported by any evidence. The remarkable privileges enjoyed by the Christians in this later phase confirm the earlier and consistently favorable situation of the Persian Christians during the first phase of Khusro's reign. They are, of course, also a consequence of his good relationship with the Byzantine Emperor Maurice, who, according to Tabari, even gave his consent to a marriage between the Persian king and his daughter Mary. It is doubtful that such a wedding ever took place, and for good reasons most scholars question Tabari's account on this point. It rather looks as if the many references to a union between Mary and Khusro are an expression of literary fiction based on the marriage between Khusro and the Christian Shirin. Ultimately, the rift between the Persian Christians and the Byzantine Church had paved the way for the advantageous situation of the former in the Persian Empire. Difficulties arose only when, from the end of the 6th century onwards, conflicts with other theological movements, above all the Monophysites, arose for the Nestorians and threatened their position in the Sasanian Empire. This was aggravated by the last and long-lasting military confrontation between West and East during the reigns of Heraclius and Khusro II Parvaz. At this point, the religious antithesis between a Christian Byzantium and a Zoroastrian Persia surfaced again and bore an impact on the military conflict. When in the year 614 the Sasanian commander Romeuzan besieged Jerusalem, one of his main goals was, according to Tabari, to capture the Holy Cross and to transport it to Ctesiphon. Tabari says he reached the city of Jerusalem and captured its bishop, and whatever priests and other Christians were there because of the wooden cross, which had been placed in a golden chest and buried in a garden with a vegetable plot sown on top of it. He harangued them until they brought them to his location. He dug it up with his own hand, took it out, and sent it to Khusro in the 24th year of his reign. Tabari's dramatic account makes it easy to imagine how the return and resurrection of the cross in the spring of 630 was celebrated as a great triumph. During the advance of the Islamic Arabs, which led to the fall of the Sasanian Empire, the Persian Christians fought alongside the conquerors. It is possible that they felt their religion had greater affinity to that of the Arab tribes than to the religion of the Zoroastrian Sasanian kings, from whose tolerant attitude they had benefited for centuries. Thank you for watching. Please like and share this video, hit the subscribe button, and feel free to ask me any question in the comments section below. Due to the sacred nature of these videos, I would prefer to keep them ad-free. Please help me to do that by clicking the Patreon link in the description box below and make a donation to this channel. Every dollar counts. Thank you for your support.